John Dickerson is with us now from Washington. And as we heard there, Donald Trump said he may pay the legal fees for that man that sucker punched a protester at one of his rallies. But he also at the same time is saying he doesn't condone violence at his rallies. So what's the strategy here?
I think the strategy is to make it up as he goes along. He said he would look into paying the legal fees. He said he didn't condone violence, but then at the same time, he also said that that this was justified, the sucker punch of the protester, because the protester had used an offensive gesture. Well, at first he said the protester was trying to hit people, and then because that wasn't the case, said, well, it was because of a gesture he made. I think if there is a strategy, it's essentially not to back down. Trump both doesn't back down, period, but also he believes that the people at his rallies, the large majority of which don't do violent things, which is the case, shouldn't be tarred by the behavior of individuals. And I think also secondarily, he's obviously got to wrestle with the idea that he has said things to incite action that is now taking place.
Well, and that's even in the beginning, John, when you look back, he would kind of play off some of the people in the crowd a little bit and almost seem to embrace a little bit of the dialogue back and forth with people. Do these images of violence from the rallies, do you think in some way Trump sees them as a political asset, or, you know, does violence change the race at all from what you see?
I don't know if it changes the race. We'll have to wait till we get some results to see if that matters. There might be a little indication we get from the voting on Tuesday whether the late deciders move more hastily away from Donald Trump. He's always had some trouble with those voters who made up their decisions in the last few days, which isn't terribly surprising. But so the question would be, would he have even more people moving away from him in the last few days? I don't know that it's an advantage. I mean, certainly his tough stance and his strength, which is sort of embodied in a whole range of things, but his response to protesters would be one of them, is a part of his brand. It's part of who he is. Its most benign form is his disapproval of excessive political correctness. But his response so far to protesters, which is to say, you know, in the old days we could have knocked them out and taken them out on a stretcher, and that he wishes he could punch someone in the face, I don't think he'll be saying those things anymore.
Well, it's kind of interesting to look back. We had one of the most civilized debates, it seemed like, and now have all this violence kind of erupting. What do you think is going on there?
Well, I think part of what's happened is you've got an organized effort on the part of groups on the left to agitate at Trump rallies. There have always been protesters, but what happened in Chicago and over this weekend is a more organized event. And so when you add that to the now again, the sucker punching of the one gentleman a week ago or several days ago was not really so much the kind of organized protest that we saw in Chicago. So there's a little bit of a difference here. But part of what's happening is you've got the agitation in the existing agitation in the Trump crowd met with new agitation in number coming from groups that from the left.
You talked about Tuesday a little bit. It really seems to be the last chance to derail Trump with his other opponents. Talking about Marco Rubio, he's down to third place in his home state of Florida. Trump is leading with 44%, Ted Cruz at 24%. Marco Rubio now, it looks like, at 21%. What are the costs for Rubio of losing his home state?
Well, if he loses his home state, it's over. So, and it's not clear, even if he wins his home state, where the path goes on from there. It depends how I mean, he's not going to do well in any of the other states. So then it's just really a question of what the outcome is in terms of Donald Trump. Does staying in help with that cause? Could there be a super long shot prospect where Marco Rubio stays in long enough to just stay alive until the convention and somehow works it out there? That's a real long shot. So I think it really depends on how Donald Trump does on Tuesday night to see whether any of the other candidates are viable.
How do you think some of this violence will play out when people head out? I mean, his supporters are angry. We know, they talk about the economy. They're angry about some issues. Do you think they come out even further for Donald Trump, or do you think this is finally a boiling point where maybe people who don't like Trump show up at the polls and derail his chances?
I don't know that people are going to be motivated to go to the polls to signify their disapproval of Donald Trump because of the rallies. I think that there are plenty of people who will look at this back and forth and pushing and shoving and say it's agitators on both sides and just be done with them. So I'm not sure that it'll draw out a whole new set of people, but we're still in the early stages of this. I don't, we'll see how if it escalates or if it goes away.
I'm wondering, there's been a lot of discussion about, the potential for a contested convention and that type of thing. If you have all of these people come out and they're in support of Donald Trump, but he doesn't necessarily have all of the delegates or is just very close to the delegates, how does the Republican Party handle this moving forward, especially as things are starting to escalate?
Well, they're going to have to figure it out as it moves along. I mean, I think the public posture of the party has to be that they'll support whoever gets the most delegates, whoever crosses the delegate threshold in the primary process. If no candidate crosses that threshold, then the Republican Party will just have to basically stay on what is a complicated and moving picture, which is in terms of the rules for the delegates, which delegates are seated and bound in what particular way. There are a set of rules that govern things, but once personal interest and ambition gets involved, it can get pretty wacky pretty fast. So the Republican Party at the moment is just saying, let's follow the process in the hope that somehow it all works out. But if it gets to a contested convention, it will be both logistically difficult because the rules they're a little malleable and they're also a little complicated, which means that people can feel like they're being cheated out of their whatever they think they deserve. And then I think secondarily, there's a political process here which might be quite damaging, which is Donald Trump has brought a lot of people into the process. He has channeled the anger of a lot of people in the Republican base to somehow maneuver him out of his nomination, if people think he is deserving of that nomination. To maneuver him out of it would be a cause for serious revolt among a huge portion of the party that Republicans need to turn out in November. So as a political matter, it would be quite dangerous to have a contested convention. And the Republican Party only has limited, that parties aren't what they used to be. So it would be a dangerous event in which they would only have a certain amount of control.
All right, John Dickerson, thank you so much for joining us. We appreciate it.
Sure thing.